There are two phrases in the scripture lesson we shared this morning that really stand out to me, and one became the sermon title, Here I Am. The other is also powerful, Come and See. I think that these phrases are found in the scripture in the order that we should respond to God's call. The first thing we should say when God calls is, Here I am, Lord. I'm available, ready, and listening for whatever you would have me to do. And then upon receiving those instructions, accepting that call, we should go out and speak to others saying, Come and see. See all that God has done for me, all that God offers you. Come and see the peace, the hope, the real life that only comes from a knowledge of and a relationship with God through Jesus Christ. Here I am. Come and see. Pretty simple, isn't it? And I do know that simple and easy are sometimes two very different things. For example, in an avalanche recovery, the solution is simple. Get rid of the snow. It's not easy because there's tons of it. So simple does not equate with easy. Another way to encapsulate the sermon this morning is that the Scrabble tiles on the bulletin cover convey the whole sermon message. Listen, understand, and act. Samuel was listening, for whom he did not yet know. After some eventual instruction from Eli, Samuel began to understand who was speaking to him and that he had good reason to listen. And then we look to John's Gospel for the third word, act. Philip went to Nathanael saying that he had seen the Messiah, and Nathanael was skeptical. So Philip answered the skepticism with three simple words, come and see. Listen, understand, and act. That's it. The whole sermon right there in a nice, tight little bundle. But you know I'm not going to let you off that easily, right? Let's see what that package contains. We start in 1 Samuel. And it's good to remember why Samuel is in the temple in the first place. He is not a zealous convert. He is there because his mother had received an answer to prayer. Hannah had prayed that if God would allow her a son, she would dedicate him to the Lord to serve all of his life. God granted Hannah that son, Samuel. And Hannah kept her promise, bringing the boy to Eli to learn how to serve in the temple. The reason I think this is important is that it shows Samuel to be a little bit distant in his service to God. He's not there out of his own knowledge and love for God, but because his mother knew and loved the Lord. Moms are important, aren't they? So Samuel is serving in the temple of the Lord and he's listening. I hope that my English teacher mother will forgive me because I'm about to end a sentence with a preposition. Samuel is serving and he is listening, but he does not yet know who or what he's listening for. In the night, Samuel hears a voice calling him by name. Now, Eli is the only one Samuel expects to hear from at that time of night, so he assumes that his master needs him. Samuel goes running in to find out what is needed. Scripture says he ran to Eli. Samuel's response was faithful and immediate. He ran to Eli, but Eli hadn't called. So Eli sent the boy back to bed. And again Samuel heard his name. Again he responded. Again it wasn't Eli. And remember what David read. Now Samuel did not yet know the Lord. The word of the Lord had not been revealed to him. Well, if it wasn't Eli, Samuel had no clue who was calling. Eli finally figured it out, and he said, if you hear that voice again, here is how you should answer. Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening. Samuel had been listening from the very beginning. He just didn't recognize the voice. He did not know the call. I think it's very important in this story that Samuel was listening. I think God kept calling in part because Samuel kept trying to answer. At no point do we see Samuel decide that the old man in the other room must have lost it and turn over and go back to bed. Every time he heard his name, Samuel responded, and finally Eli caught on. and taught Samuel how to respond. Do we listen that intently? Are we willing to respond immediately when called into service? Or is it easier to roll over and go back to sleep? If the call is confusing or daunting or in a voice we do not know, do we respond or do we ignore? Consider if it's an unidentified phone number on your caller ID. Do we respond or do we ignore? In light of our sometime reluctance to answer God's call, I looked again at the second sentence in the passage from Samuel and I wondered. The line says, in those days, the word of the Lord was rare. There were not many visions. And I wonder whether it's truly accurate to read that the word of the Lord was rare in those days, or whether it was rare for people actually to listen and respond. Were there really no words from God? Or simply no hearers? No one listening? Were there few visions or few visionaries? And when we say today that we don't hear God speak, is it because God isn't speaking, or is it because we're not listening? I believe and I am very much a part of this I believe that we're not really listening. I think it's imperative that we begin to listen to God's call. I think it's imperative that we respond immediately, whether the message is confusing or challenging or beyond our perception of our own capacity. We must remember that the gifts we have are from God. The call we receive comes from God. And I find it very difficult to believe that God would call us to something for which God won't gift us. Don't you? So when God calls, we must listen and respond. So now we look at the gospel message. Jesus meets Philip, and the call is simple. Follow me. In following Jesus, Philip met his friend Nathanael. Filled with the good news, Philip said, we have found the one Moses wrote about, the one the prophets wrote about. It's Jesus, the son of Joseph, Jesus of Nazareth. Now Nathanael knew some folks from Nazareth, and he knew the reputation of folks from Nazareth, and he was not easily convinced. So he said, Nazareth? Can anything good come from there? It might be a little bit like some of you saying, KU, can anything good come from there? And I would answer right along with Philip, come and see. Yesterday's store notwithstanding. Nathanael got up and went with Philip to meet Jesus. And that's good news for us. See, Philip didn't have to convince Nathanael who Jesus was. All Philip had to do was convince Nathanael to come and meet Jesus for himself, to come and see. We are not responsible for the conversion of others. It is Jesus who changes the heart. It is Jesus who saves the soul. It is our responsibility and our privilege to invite everyone to come and see. Come and see who Jesus is. Come and see what a loving church we attend. Come and see life at its richest and its fullness. Oh, my friend, come and see. So Nathanael came with Philip, and Jesus immediately engaged him in conversation. John tells us that when Jesus saw Nathanael coming, he said, "This is a true Israelite, in whom there is nothing false." Nathanael asked, "How do you know me?" And Jesus said, "I saw you while you were under the fig tree before Philip called." And Nathanael declared, "Rabbi, you are the Son of God, the King of Israel." And Jesus said, "You believe because I told you I saw you under the fig tree? You'll see greater things than that." And he added, "I tell you the truth, you shall see heaven open and angels ascending and descending on the Son of Man." Nathanael recognized Jesus because Nathanael listened to Jesus. He heard who Jesus was in the words Jesus used. He knew Jesus in the tone Jesus used. Now I'm afraid I'm about to quit preaching and go to meddling. That's the preacher's job sometimes. My question for us all is, when we engage others in conversation, does that conversation tell them who Jesus is? I'm not talking just about the words we use. We don't have to sprinkle holy words and bless your hearts into all of our conversations. Is our sincere love for Jesus apparent in our words and in our conversations and in our lives? When we invite someone to come and see, what do they see? Who do they see? Do they recognize Jesus in us? And I know that I've asked a bunch of questions this morning. I don't apologize for that. Sometimes the sermon is designed to tell you what to do. Sometimes it is to ask you prayerfully to consider your answers to some very personal questions. The answer Samuel gave was, "Here I am." Philip answered, "Come and see." Your homework assignment is this. Consider, are you listening even when you're not completely certain what you're listening for? Sorry, Mom. When you do hear, are you willing to respond immediately? "Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening." What or who is it that we are inviting people to come and see? And when others encounter us, observe us, listen to us, do they see Jesus in us? Such questions, as I said, are really pretty simple. They're not so easy, but they're simple. Jesus is calling each of us, "Follow me." How will we answer? Is it, "Here I am, Lord"? And finally, I ask, who is waiting for you to come to them, to invite them to come and see? Amen.